Everyone, welcome to the May 10th regular session City Council meeting. So can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring. Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Waters.
Here.
And Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to note that Councilwoman Hidalgo-Faring isn't here yet. Hopefully she will pop in any minute. So I have a reminder to the public that we are not live streaming this meeting tonight. So you can still view it by going to longmontpublicmedia.org/watch/. So anyone that wants to speak at first call public invited to be heard, you have to add your name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those who have added their name will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will still have the opportunity to speak during public invited to be heard on items this evening, or at the very final call, public invited to be heard at the end of the meeting. And I would like to note that Councilwoman Hidalgo-Faring has entered the room. You're welcome. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 5th?
So moved.
Thank you.
And Mayor, there were no minutes for approval on this
Oh, I'm sorry.
last agenda.
I just read approval of minutes and go with that. Sorry. Lucienne, do we have any agenda revisions?
We do indeed this evening, Mayor. First of all, on consent, item 9B10, which was Resolution R 2022-79, involving agreements with Phyllis E. Owen for the purchase of real property. That item is being removed from the agenda tonight due to some issues surrounding that agreement.
Okay.
Additionally, council members will find at their desk a substitute copy of the agreement for item 9H, which was Resolution R 2022-88, resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the Second Amendment to the 2019 Intergovernmental Agreement between the cities of Boulder and Longmont, granting Longmont funds to implement and manage a housing rehabilitation program for the city of Boulder. There were some typographical issues in the copy that went out with the packet and was posted, an incorrect reception number in paragraph B, and then we also needed to add the words of Longmont to the word city in section 4, and so a corrected copy of that agreement is in front of council members this evening. And finally, staff would like to pull item 9I for the Water Supply and Drought Management Plan for 2022 and 2023 for presentation this evening.
Thank you. Got that. Okay, do any councilors have items that they would like to put on future agendas? Seeing none, we will go to the city manager's report, or in this case, the assistant city manager, as our city manager, Harold Dominguez, is not here this evening.
No report, Mayor.
All right. We do have a special report and presentation, but actually it's a proclamation tonight designating May 22nd as No Mow May in Longmont. I'm going to read the proclamation, and if someone, who presented this? Are you in the room? You are, that group. Okay. After I read it, if you would like to come up and make some statements. So a proclamation designating May 2022 as No Mow May in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the citizens of Longmont recognize that pollinators are crucial contributions to essentially every terrestrial ecosystem on Earth, assisting in plant reproduction and supporting other species of wildlife. And whereas pollinators touch our lives in numerous ways each day, including being responsible for approximately 1/3 of the food and drink we consume. And whereas the citizens and City of Longmont acknowledge that the traditional monoculture lawn lacks floral resources or nesting sites for pollinators. And whereas the citizens and city of Longmont recognize reduced mowing can create habitat and increase the abundance and diversity of wildlife, including bees and other pollinators. And whereas No Mow May aims to encourage citizens to allow lawns to grow unmown for the month of May, creating important habitat and forage for early season pollinators. Now therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as No Mow May in Longmont and encourage community members to participate by not mowing their lawns in May. So would you like to come up?
Hi, thank you very much, Mayor Peck. And I wanted to give an extra shout out to Councilmember Martin for the extra support she gave me in suggesting this proclamation. So as you proclaimed, it's No Mow May. So what I wanted to talk a little about why we wanted to do this. Lawns are the single largest irrigated crop that we grow. They provide little benefit to wildlife and use large amounts of money, time, and other resources. As you mentioned, the traditional monoculture lawn lacks floral resources and nesting sites for bees and is often treated with large amounts of pesticides and herbicides that harm bees and other invertebrates. We need to rethink the American lawn and other turf areas in our city. Supporting No Mow May is a great way for the city and residents to recognize this need for change. Mowing lawns less creates habitat and increases the abundance and diversity of wildlife, including bees and other pollinators. It saves water, helps your lawns become more resilient to drought, reduces emissions from gas-powered lawn equipment that often lack emission reduction equipment. So I think this is exciting, and I hope everyone will try and get their HOAs on board with this as well. So thank you very much, Council and Mayor Peck.
Thank you. Would you care to have a picture taken while we give you the
Sure,
proclamation?
we have a few people here that would.
Oh, they all
yeah.
want to speak?
No, they
Okay.
just wanted to be here for the
For the
presentation.
picture?
Yeah. and for the
Okay.
picture.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the first call, public invited to be heard, I would like to take a moment to recognize our transportation planners, Phil Greenwald and Ben Ortiz. At the recent Dr. Cog Awards celebration, Longmont's transportation planner, Phil Greenwald, was recognized for his work on the Way to Go program. He's not here. Through RTD. This is an exciting program, and it is the first time in 2.5 years that Dr. Cog actually had an in-person meeting and award celebration. So it was really with pride that I watched Phil go up, and it was very interesting to watch he and Ben decide who was going to go up and get this award. So Way to Go is a program through RTD, and it is free transit. So if anyone's interested, go on the RTD site and search for Way to Go, and it might be something that you would like to try out. So now we can go on for first call, public invited to be heard. Remember that we have 3 minutes, and would you please state your name and address? The first one is Jeremy Gregory.
Thank you, Mayor Peck and City Council. Jeremy Gregory, 238 Sweet Valley Court, Longmont, Colorado. And I just want to take a quick moment to sincerely thank you for making the month of May No Mow May. This can be a really big step in educating and more so inspiring our community to incorporate attainable solutions-based practices in their lives to help protect our environment. But we shouldn't stop here. Let this be just one of many other vital steps that we can take from replacing water-sucking lawns in favor of more endemic drought-tolerant landscaping to concepts like removing single-use plastics from our city and using something that is more ecologically sound even. These high-impact solutions are something that my fellow colleagues and I will be looking forward to working with City Council on in the near future. But again, thank you again for being open and receptive to ideas that protect our environment while improving the quality of life for all the residents of Longmont, including the sentient beings we share this amazing place with. So thank you guys. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Jeremy. Anna? Looks like that, okay. It looked like you crossed your name off for a moment.
I had to rewrite my address correctly.
Oh, okay.
Hi, yes, my name's Anna Rivas. I'm at 4501 Nelson Road. And while we're on the subject of no mow May and rethinking attitudes and practices around mowing grass, I wanted to also bring up a related issue that needs reconsideration. With climate change and the impact it's having on our water resources, we need to reevaluate where that water is used. I was reading in the Denver Post about the 20-year mega drought we're in. This year, Colorado didn't get enough snow over the winter to recover its dry soils and waterways. At best, portions of the states are considered abnormally dry by the U.S. Drought Monitor. At worst, we're in the southeast and southwest corners are in an exceptional drought. Colorado didn't get enough snow to fully recover from the ongoing megadrought, and whatever snow we did get is melting too quickly, and it's going to be probably completely melted out by end of May or beginning of June. This pattern is only the beginning of what we'll see with climate change. In light of such a dramatic decrease in available water, plans that were made almost 2 decades ago when climate change was barely registering on most people's minds need to be reevaluated. Specifically, I'm thinking about the plans that were made for Dry Creek Park. Although there is a small creek that flows through there, it will likely completely live up to its name in the near future. The plan calls for planting the area with turf for more sports fields. Given the scenario we're facing, creating new vast expanses of grass that need watering, fertilizing, mowing, and herbicides are the opposite of what's called for. It would be unwise to refuse to course correct and instead follow through with the plans that were made when we still were not acknowledging the reality of climate change. Now, with all the recent fires we have seen and the undeniable fact that we're not getting the snow and rain that we're so used to getting, forging ahead with such plans would be like plowing a ship into an iceberg simply because it was a designated course. In light of climate change and the threats of facing pollinators, rather than proceeding to create an area that needs to be pampered with regular watering and mowing, fertilizing, and pesticide applications, it makes more sense to leave the area in a more natural state. Moreover, during the pandemic, many people rediscovered the comfort and joy to be found in spending time in nature, observing birds and other wildlife. Spending time in nature has been scientifically proven to help with mental health problems such as anxiety and depression. The American Psychological Association has said that spending time in nature is linked to both cognitive benefits and improvements in mood, mental health, and emotional well-being. With the current state of the world and the economic situation, we could certainly use more doses of nature. So I hope you will reconsider your plans to destroy this small, quiet pocket of nature that exists in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I apologize for this next name if I screw it up. Anthony Carrillo?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
My first time up here. My name is Anthony. I'm with Changing the Future. We help out with the homeless here in Longmont. And I know there is an issue that keeps coming up about Lenin Park. I want to bring to your attention is that a lot of them, they're afraid. They're afraid to go for help. They're afraid to go to Hope. They're afraid to go to the Hour Center. Mostly because they got tickets for trespassing and small things. What has been said to me is that a lot of them are being arrested. They will go to jail. They'll come out. They'll go back into jail. And that's just for being at the park. I know that a lot of them are on drugs. There's a lot of issues with that. But there is a lot of good ones. And the way I see it is I look at them as kids, as family. There's always that family member or that child that doesn't listen to you. And all we can do is just try and help, no matter what, even if they keep doing bad. Because one day they're going to give up and say, you know what, I want to change. And I want to be there to help them. We've helped with cell phones. We help with jobs. We help with food. We help with clothes out of our own pockets. Now, I'm not officially a 501c3, but it's a goal of mine because I used to be homeless myself. I used to live in parks. I used to live with family, friends. I had to move from places. I used to live right across the street at the in-between. I got kicked out because they said I was doing drugs. That was false. There was a lot of things, but I came up in life, and now I want to help the homeless. A lot of them are not here. A lot of them would like to speak. A lot of people, they don't know their side of the stories. We don't know until we actually talk to them. A lot of the stuff that they go through with Hope and with the Hour Center, with a lot of the other nonprofits, no one doesn't see it. No one doesn't hear it. They're afraid. Right now, I have about 20 to 30 that are living outside of Longmont, which no one's never seen, off of 119th and Kim Pratt. They have tomorrow to leave. They only have a week. They've been there for 3 years undetected because they just want to be left alone. Now, we could push them to the side. We can hide them, but they're still people. We're still going to have this problem. We're going to keep having this problem until we fix it, until they actually have a spot. I understand the kids want to play at the parks. I understand about all that. But there's the ones that are afraid, or the ones that actually don't have a chance. They don't have a driver's license. And when the police stop by and they throw away their stuff, and they have their driver's license in there, guess what? They have to start all over. No one doesn't know until they actually talk to them. There's times where I had to go pick up trash, and I know it wasn't them. It could be a random person that doesn't like the homeless that throws the trash. There's way more to this story, and no one's not paying attention to it. I actually took time from work to come to say this.
Thank you, Anthony, and keep up your work, your good work.
Thank you.
Paula Fitzgerald.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and Councilman. My name is Paula Fitzgerald. I'm at 419 Emery Street. You'll be voting tonight on the proposed change to the public lands section of the municipal code. There are 3 sections in this proposed amendment. 2 of them define camping and shelter use, and I have no problem with those. But the 3rd change relates to park hours, and this is a mistake. The proposed change will move hours for neighborhood parks to the same category as nature areas and greenways, which are habitat areas with an abundance of wildlife. Neighborhood parks generally do not have an abundance of wildlife. This is an inappropriate change and doesn't fit the park areas. The apparent reason for the change is to address the homeless issue at Lanyon Park and maybe a handful of other parks. I understand this is a big problem for Lanyon, but to take a blanket approach to the entire city because of issues at Lanyon is unreasonable. There have been very few problems with use until 11 p.m. in most of our other 25 neighborhood parks. So why punish the entire community for the problems at one? These are public parks and should be open and accessible to the public as much as is reasonable. The exceptions in the proposed ordinance also shorten the time of use from 11 to 10 p.m. for specific lighted facilities. What about those who may be in the park because a family member is playing in a lighted facility, but they want to enjoy in other areas of the park? What about those warm winter nights when the sun sets at 4 p.m., but is still pleasant enough to enjoy your neighborhood park? For those that return home from work at 5 p.m. or later, they'd just be out of luck. This ordinance change is unreasonable and not localized to the problem area. Temporary rules are needed at times and should be enacted when and where appropriate. Lanyon has needed temporary rules to address a problem with homelessness, and that park should continue to utilize them until the problem is solved. But please don't make the answer to this problem a problem in itself. I also object to the lack of public process in this proposal. As far as I can tell, a very small staff group and hand-picked community members vetted this change. Only last night did it go to Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and there wasn't any information on the proposal in the agenda packet. That's a poor way to engage the public. I ask that you amend this amendment by removing the park hours recommendation. Continue to work on Lanyon to resolve that problem. Some of you may remember Don Bessler, who was Parks and Rec Director several years ago. Don was fond of saying, legitimate use displaces illegitimate use. This is true. Let's encourage people to get out and use our parks and target the problems when and where they arise. Keep our parks open for us to enjoy, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Sharon O'Leary.
Sharon O'Leary, 534 Emery Street. City Council, on your agenda, 12B, there is an item about changing all city park hours to close 1 hour after sunset and 1 hour before sunrise. This is a huge change to the long-standing standard of Longmont neighborhood parks, which is 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., which is also curfew. It appears that the city change of park hours is to match those of the greenway and nature areas, which you should be aware of have completely different standards as well as uses. This decision was not made with PRAB, Parks and Rec Board input until the night prior to this meeting. But most importantly, it was not made with public input. One can only guess the reason for this landmark change. Could it be a short-sighted decision to a solution to homelessness? So instead of gathering public input on the societal issue, the city will punish all citizens with less hours to access their neighborhood park. Tax-paying citizens who also pay a bonus, $2 parks and greenway monthly maintenance fee, will have less park access due to problems of non-tax-paying citizens. I believe there are better solutions. First, gather in-depth data to support your decision from other cities across Colorado and other states. What are their neighborhood park hours? What are their community park hours? What solutions have those cities used to address homelessness in neighborhood parks? A majority of cities have already had to deal with this issue. Are the majority of these cities using one-size-fits-all as an approach, and has it been successful? Well, for starters, let's just look at the resource Longmont already has in place. This should have been a multi-meeting agenda item for Neighborhood Group Leaders Association, instead of our typical items such as city trash and composting and how that department operates. The NGLA website states that the mission of NGLA is a forum for community leaders to collectively identify concerns, discuss issues, resolve conflict, implement solutions, and create healthy neighborhoods with a strong sense of community. Gathering information and ideas from other neighborhoods is a great starting point. Next, NGLA city employee Wayne Tomac and his team should be assisting the neighbors of Lanyon Park in becoming a registered neighborhood, along with the assistance of other organized neighborhoods. Give Lanyon Park the same time and attention that HOAs presently receive. Finally, displace undesirable use with desirable use. Load up this park with family and community activities. Don't pass the burden of increased costs to make new park signs and for the new hours and the added cost of enforcement, whether it's rangers or police officers, onto the Longmont citizens. Please do not make rules for a small number of people.
Thank you,
Let's
Sharon.
put public
Thank you.
back into the process.
Thank you, Sharon. Jeffrey Justice.
Jeffrey Justice, 1402 Emery Court. I want to start with my conclusion is I don't have the answer. Talking about the homeless situation. I've been walking my dogs around Longmont for 12 years, so I've seen a lot. I've been through all the parks, all the outlying areas. I've seen a lot. probably more than most people. I run into, the homeless or the displaced people all the time. Some of them are very nice. I look forward to seeing them. I don't think they cause problems at all, but they're just displaced and they have no means. Others do have a problem and do cause problems. There's a lot of intravenous drug use, needles left all over the place. I've seen all that too. But to me, this is just a problem of society. I don't see what the answer is. If you move people away from Lanyon Park, where are they going to go? They don't have any means. So they're going to go to another park, Spangler Park, Collier Park. It's just to another place and to another place. I don't know what the answer is, but you have people that, some have drug problems, some do this by choice. I look at them as refugees. I think some things that could be done, I would like to see more porta potties around certain areas because, where do people go? You could put them in certain areas and that might help some things. But the main thing that for me is where do they go? You clear Lanyon Park, but I don't think the police are going to start arresting people. People don't even get arrested for car theft and catalytic converter theft. They get a citation. So what are they going to do when someone's in a park after hours? So I don't have the answer. I just think I treat these people as people. I don't know what the answer is. It's just a problem of our society. And I hope Longmont can come together with gentlemen like this and others and get some relief for this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Paige Lewis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Paige Lewis. I live at 805 Nelson Park Lane. I'm currently the chair of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and I noted that you have our motion with regard to a new recreation facility on your agenda later tonight. So I just wanted to come and express the board's appreciation for you considering our motion and let you know that this really remains a top priority for the board, so much so that we have put it as a standing item on all of our agendas so that we can stay regularly in touch with staff and council members as this issue is considered. Despite the fact that the recent ballot initiative related to a pool and ice did not pass, we continue to hear a lot of interest from the public, a lot of strong demand for additional recreation facilities in Longmont, and a feeling that for a city of our size, we really are lacking in those facilities, and it's something that it's important to address. We do think it's important that prior to action, the council invests in updated polling and feasibility analysis to make sure that our understanding of what the community's priorities are with regard to new recreation facilities is current. A lot of things have changed through our experience of COVID, and it's important that we approach this with an updated perspective. We also want to know what are the best options for designing a facility or complex that maximizes recreation opportunities for the city and surrounding communities, is up to date and also fiscally responsible. So again, I really just wanted to come tonight and express our appreciation for you taking this up. We stand ready to work with you as you determine next steps on this important issue for the well-being and health of the community.
Thank you, Paige. Aaron Angel, or Ann Hill? Angel.
Hi, my name is Erin Angel, and I live at 1304 South Terry Street, and I hate public speaking. And so it's making me nervous, which I shouldn't be. I happen to be on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board as well, but I don't pretend to speak for the board on this. We actually were just kind of alerted to the situation with the new curfew in the parks and the new regulations for shelters. That was just told to us last night. So I haven't even had much time to ruminate on that part, except for to say that I think 2 hours in a park shelter is too short for anybody's really good birthday party. And not everybody does feel comfortable renting the park shelter, because not everybody has the money for that. So I'd say bump it up to 2.5 hours, maybe 3, and I'd be on board with that personally. The part that really, really deep-seated bothers me about that whole proposition is, well, first, the lack of public process. And I know that you really worked hard for certain groups to get their voice heard with Lanyon Park, but that same effort wasn't extended to all the community members and for all the parks. And my park doesn't fit that mold. I live by Kanemoto Park. In fact, I call most of the parks my park, but they're your parks too, and hers and his, and they're all our parks. And my park doesn't fit that mold of being able to be closed right after dark. So my park happens to be in Southmore Park, where we have a super mixed group of people. And lots of my neighbors work construction and roofing and landscaping. And in the summers, they don't come home until after dark, because that's when their job ends. And they still have a need to recreate, and they do recreate. And their families go out and they kick back and hang out in the park until midnight or later. But mostly kids go home at midnight, and maybe the parents are staying up later. Our park is alive and kicking and happy and fun after dark. And I'd like to see all the parks like that. I bet Lanyon could be like that too, if more people would come out and be in Lanyon Park. I know that there's been a push by some people in the city to create some activities there, and we're just going to go out and do it. And I was asked to sign up for that like a month ago. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to help out where I can. But I ask you not to make a blanket curfew. It makes our young people uncomfortable to be approached by the police on the curfew, and they shouldn't feel uncomfortable in their parks. They're their parks. And thanks, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Erin. Strider?
I do. Strider Benston, 951 West 17th. It was great to see Erin here. We're in the same church that donated land and built small homes for people, and we also melted down guns into agricultural instruments, so that's cool. And as often is the case, I agree with everything everybody has said. And also, I've been a no-mow in May for the last 70 years or more. I eat my dandelions. That's about the best food on the planet. Most people poison them, and then the butterflies and bees get poisoned because they put poison out in everywhere. But so many things. I just read today a preacher at a white Southern Baptist megachurch near my hometown in Fort Smith, Arkansas, said he cannot preach anymore because many people in his congregation, well, he made some reference to people don't worship God anymore, they worship celebrities, you know, and could be Oprah, could be Trump. He mentioned Tom Hanks, and he got assaulted by people in his own church. He's the senior pastor of a mega church because they said, oh, Tom Hanks eats babies. And this is the type of insanity of a major portion of our country that is taking place now. And it just, QAnon, Putin, Trump, it's the same person pretty much. And this Oanon is the same as Putin. They were ordered to dismiss their lying about the election in 2020, but they're continuing to do it. They just made one little statement that nobody watched. The Supreme Court, all right, they've said women are no longer citizens. They have no rights. They can be thrown in jail, and their doctors and their mother and their taxi cab drivers and such as that. And then they said, well, we got a foothold. Let's go back. Let's abolish any Supreme Court decision we don't like Brown versus Board, resegregate the schools officially, and they can go back to Dred Scott. Black people are no longer human beings.
Thank you, Strider.
Let's wake up and realize what's happening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak at first public invited to be heard? Seeing none, I'm going to close public invited to be heard, and we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Lucianne, would you mind reading the items in the consent agenda into the record?
Certainly, Mayor. Ordinances on this consent agenda will be set for second reading and public hearing on May 24th, 2022, unless otherwise noted following the item title. Item 9A is Ordinance O 2022-18, a bill for an ordinance authorizing a long-term water supply agreement between the City of Longmont, acting by and through its water utility enterprise, East Cherry Creek Valley Water and Sanitation District, acting on its own and on behalf of its East Cherry Creek Valley Water Activity Enterprise, Inc., Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Authority, and United Water and Sanitation District. Item 9B is resolutions of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the city and multiple property owners along 17th Avenue for the purchase of real property for sidewalk improvements. And the following 13 items are those agreements along 17th Ave. One is R 2022-70, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Robert P. Gilligan for the purchase of real property at 2210 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Two is R 2022-71, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Larry J. Hayes for the purchase of real property at 2150 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Three is R 2022-72, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont, Paul C. Hoffman, and Robert R. Orlando for the purchase of real property at 1724 Sumner Street for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Four is R 2022-73, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont, Michael G. Jordan and Marie A. Jordan for the purchase of real property at 1708 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Five is R 2022-74, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and the estate of Merle S. Kevin and Lois H. Kevin for the purchase of real property at 1408 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Six is R 2022-75, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Robert L. Kevin for the purchase of real property at 1424 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Seven is R 2022-76, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont, Sharon Ann Lundgren, and Donald E. Ketch for the purchase of real property at 1808 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Eight is R 2022-77, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Kathy M. Moore for the purchase of real property at 1802 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Nine is R 2022-78, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Sarah Joyce Morrow for the purchase of real property at 1524 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. 10, R 2022-79, was removed from the consent agenda as noted earlier. 11 is R 2022-80, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Mary Jo Rourke for the purchase of real property at 1500 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. 12 is R 2022-81, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Judy K. Turner for the purchase of real property at 1608 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. And 13 is R 2022-82, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and David J. Welter for the purchase of real property at 1600 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Item 9C is R 2022-83, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for parent education services for family engaged in the Rewind program. 9D is R 2022-84, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and Able to Sail for summer camps at Union Reservoir. 9E is R 2022-85, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and Rocky Mountain Paddleboard LLC for paddleboard operations at Union Reservoir. 9F is R 2022-86, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and the Union Sailing Club to provide sailing opportunities at Union Reservoir. 9G is R 2022-87, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the revocable permit and agreement between the city and Garden Acres Batting Ranges LLC to provide batting cage operations at Garden Acres Community Park. 9H is R 2022-88, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the Second Amendment to the 2019 intergovernmental agreement between the cities of Boulder and Longmont, granting Longmont funds to implement and manage a housing rehabilitation program for the city of Boulder. 9I is accept the City of Longmont's 2022-2023 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan. And 9J is approve 2 capital improvement program amendments.
Thank you, Lucian. That was a very long, yay. Great. Are there any counselors that would like to pull any items off of this consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I move to approve the consent agenda. Can I have a second?
I would second it. I think we need to remove though.
Oh, that's right.
So if you want to
Go ahead and make the motion. I take my motion off of the agenda, and Councilman Waters is going to make one.
I move approval of the consent agenda minus item 9H.
Yes.
We want to take off, no, 9I.
I, correct.
9I we want to take off.
9I, and then also,
The replacement language for 9H.
Did we want to take off 10 as well for the B10?
I'll amend my motion to include B10.
Thank you. We're going to get this right. So it's been seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor? Are we going to vote? Yep. Vote electronically. And that passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for moving that. So are we going to have a staff presentation? No, we'll wait for that. So we're going to move right into the ordinance on second reading and public hearings on any matter. At this time, if anyone in the public would like to speak on an item on this agenda when it is called for public invited to be heard, now would be the time to do that. Number 10 is A. 10A is O 2022-16, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 2.84.020 of the Longmont Municipal Code on the Senior Citizens Advisory Board. Do we have a staff report on this? No? Okay. Do we have any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, would the public is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Can I have a motion for this ordinance? Councilor Martin.
I move passage of ordinance O 2022.
Okay.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. All those in favor? All right, let's vote. Shall we just do a hand vote on this one? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? That passes unanimously. 10B is a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 11.04, Section 11.04.140 of the Longmont Municipal Code on the extension of the traffic safety surcharge. Do we have a staff report on this ordinance? Seeing none, do we have any discussion from councilors on this ordinance? Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and let's vote on.
I move ordinance 2022-17.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Now we're going to go to items that have been removed from the consent agenda, which is items I and 10. Just I, not 10. Okay.
One's amended.
One's amended and removed, yeah, okay. And we do have a presentation. Hello.
Good evening, Mayor and Council Member. Again, Ken Houston, I'm the Water Resources Manager at the City of Longmont, and tonight we'd like to present the 2022-23 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan. As you have probably been hearing in the news, there's a little concern about the water supply all over the state of Colorado, especially southern. And so I'd like to introduce Wes Lowry, who's our Water Resources Analyst, who does a lot of the number crunching on this, so I wanted to give him an opportunity to go over some of the numbers, and then also a little explanation for why we are where we are in Longmont versus some of the other cities. So thank you very much. Wes?
Madam Mayor and members of council, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you guys about the City of Longmont's Water Supply and Drought Management Plan for the 2022-2023. Last month, this plan was presented to the Longmont Water Board and the Sustainability Advisory Board, and at their meetings, they concurred with staff to recommend acceptance of the plan before you tonight. Let's see here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the water supply and demand projections for this year. So comparing Longmont's water supply to projected demand is the principal evaluation tool that the plan uses to determine the most appropriate drought response level for Longmont. So kind of a summary of that plan that was included in your packet. And as described in the plan, one of the primary indicators for determining if Longmont is at a sustainable conservation level is when water supply is 135% of its projected demand. For 2022, Longmont is projected at 141%. For comparison, in 2020 and 2021, Longmont's percent of supply to demand was 138 and 141% respectively. Currently, the snowpack, stream flow, and storage for the St. Vrain Basin are near average. And then I'm going to highlight the snowpack differences later in this presentation. The 2023 and 2024 percent of supply demand projections are 140 and 137%. So you can see that we're slightly above that trigger. So what is the current level of drought? In May of last year, Council accepted the Longmont's current 2021 and 22 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan, which established Longmont to be at a sustainable conservation level. So that's where we're at now, and that's also where we're proposing that it remain. This year's plan also indicates Longmont will remain at that same level. And based upon our water treatment plan production information, Longmont customers have continued to demonstrate that they're doing their best management practices. In 2021, customers used approximately 95% of the amount of water that was used by customers in 2002. So although we've had more customers, more people living in the city in the last 19 years, the amount of per capita use has went down, thus less water use. When at a sustainable conservation level, the city will continue to implement public information efforts. The city will voluntarily work towards a 10% reduction in water use for all city uses. There will be no surplus water rental declaration, and staff will continuously monitor water demand and supply uses. So looking at comparing City of Longmont with other Front Range water providers, one of the goals of this presentation is to explain what some of the primary differences are between Longmont and other Front Range cities, as they may find themselves in different drought response levels. So why is Longmont still at this level when others are not? Many of the most senior water rights in the South Platte Basin can be found originating in the greater Longmont area. And by application of our raw water requirement policy, we've received a large interest in those water rights. And because of that, we now have a very strong senior water rights portfolio. Longmont's overall trans-basin water supply, so those will be waters that come from the Colorado Big Thompson River project. That is a significant source of Longmont's total supply. And so we have a lot of water that's available to us because of that. And I'll speak to that here in a little bit. Local storage is near average. The South Platte River storage, so that'd be out in eastern Longmont, is above average. So as the water comes out of the mountains through snowmelt, there's a smaller hole than might otherwise we would find. Longmont's guiding water principles, in particular application of the raw water requirement policy, water conservation master plan, and raw water master plan, continue to position Longmont in a really strong position. Probably, though, the most significant difference this year is that of the snowpack. Snowpack in the St. Vereen Basin is near 100% of average and is one of the strongest in Colorado. A lot of other watersheds don't have as strong of a snowpack as we do. You find that there's kind of a invisible line in Colorado. If you're north of that line, it's typically, we're finding that it's wetter. If you're south of that line, it's drier. And that line kind of ebbs and flows. This year, we're kind of on the north side or in the wetter side. So here's a graph. The graph represents where South Platte River Basin snowpack is. So this would be for the entire South Platte River Basin. The upper line is the maximum that we've seen. The middle line, the green line, is the average, and the red line is the minimum amount. So you might consider the red line typically represents what we would have seen in 2002 for those that were around Longmont at that time. In the South Platte Basin, the overall snowpack is currently around 85%, and that's represented by that dark black line. Whereas in the North St. Vereen Basin, that's the watershed that feeds Button Rock Reservoir, Longmont's water supply primarily for the winter time, which is at nearly 100%. So again, our specific basin in snowpack is doing much better than others. Next, we've got a slide on the upper Colorado River snowpack, which shows the supplies there to be around 75%. This particular graph represents where communities such as Denver and Aurora would get their transbasin supplies. In comparison to Longmont, this is a graph that as an example of what the snowpack looks where Longmont gets its transbasin supplies, which again shows our snowpack to be slightly over 100%. So some of the factors that may impact Longmont's outlook, we've identified a number of different ones. These factors kind of categorized into 4 general groups. The first being if there was a significant increase of Longmont customer water use over projected amount. So in other words, if for whatever reason the customers used more than was expected, when we run our scenarios, we anticipate up to about a 2.5% increase over the previous year. And that seems to be a fairly conservative estimate. The second would be a significant reduction in late summer precipitation. So if it's very dry and hot, that would make a difference. We typically see that we receive about 1.5 inches per month on the average in the summer months. So if we don't get those types of rain and it's hot and dry, windy, which we're all tired of, that could have an impact. Significantly abnormal runoff. That would be where the runoff is quick and short. That means there's less water in the longer end of the summer. That would happen if it got really hot early on and stayed hot for a couple weeks. That would have an impact. Lastly would be a disruptive event such as major fires, and we've all experienced those. Any one of those 4 things could change the outlook, but those are the 4 primary categories. So lastly, we wanted to highlight 2 data summary charts that were included in the board's packet. They're referred to as Table A and Table B. Those are the 2 tables that really define as to what level we would be at. So the first one here is the Table A that was found in the board's packet. This graph, it shows on the far right, you can't read it unless you're looking in your packet or maybe home online, but the far left column shows what it was in 2002. And that was when we were last at a level 1, and for a short period we were at a level 2 drought response. Excuse me. The next 2 columns show what the supply versus demand was for 2020 and 2021. The middle column is for this year, and then the last 2 for the 2 years following in 2023 and 2024. So what we're really paying attention to in this plan is what is the projection for this year and the next 2 years, all of which, as I indicated earlier, are above the 135% trigger point. Then lastly, Table B. This speaks specifically to Ralph Price Reservoir, and it gives a amount that is to be expected in storage at the end of the runoff. For that, we choose July 15th. And staff's prediction is that Button Rock will fill, and certainly within the greater than 90% necessary to be at a sustainable conservation level. So the runoff typically begins at the end of April. This year, we found that in our basin, it's not started until just last week, so at the first part of May. So it's actually moved back. So we're just now starting to fill Button Rock, but we're definitely positioned to be able to fill it by the end of the runoff season. With that, if there's any questions, or if they're really hard, Ken can help answer them. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Thank you, Wes. Councillor Martin. Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Great job as always, Wes, and this was a really clear presentation, and it explains that Longmont has been prudent in the way it has provisioned itself with water, and that we have been prudent in the way we have used water in the past, and we have plenty, is the bottom line there. It doesn't answer a question that environmentalists in the city often ask in good conscience, and we had one today in public invited to be heard, where the conclusion was we should not plan to do something that uses water because that water belongs in the Colorado River. And here we have a situation where lakes all the way down from the one that actually we get our hydropower from, all the way down to Powell and Meade, are so low that the hydro vents are sticking up out of the surface of the water, or very nearly so. And so the question that the public asks is, why can't we put our excess back? Or more logically speaking, why can't we simply decline to divert the water that we don't need and leave it on the western slope? I know that there is a pile of case law and Colorado amazingly complex water law, and it may be a precedent we don't want to set, but I would like you guys to explain this in like we're five, and explain to us why that's difficult, or why that's inadvisable, or why we've never done it before. What would have to happen if we needed to do that?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Martin. Yeah, that's a very good question, and a very complex, large question to answer, and I'll try not to take too long. But it's both driven by Colorado water law and what can happen with water in Colorado, as well as the Colorado River Compact, which directs really what happens with water in the Colorado River all the way to and including Mexico. Any water that our West Slope water, our two West Slope water supply sources, the Colorado Big Thompson and Windy Gap water projects, either one of those two projects, they are, Longmont's not the only participant. So in the case of the Colorado Big Thompson projects, there's 310,000 shares of CBT, or allotment units of the CBT. Longmont owns about 12,000, so we're 12,310 thousandths. So we got a significant holding, but we're still a very, very small portion of that project. If we chose not to, and most years we do, we rarely, if ever, use all of our CBT water because we hold it towards the end of the summer to make sure we have sufficient supplies when the native streams, or native basin, goes down. If we don't use that water, it essentially reverts back to the CBT system and then is reallocated that next year, and we get our proportionate allocation, but it's reallocated to all the participants in the project. The CBT project does occasionally fill and spill, but it's fairly rare. Most years, there isn't sufficient water to completely fill it, so any water that's not used by Longmont would essentially not go down to either Lake Powell or Lake Meade, and would be reallocated to other users. Then if any water would to go on past the Colorado Big Thompson, which is the very headwaters, there are many, many, many water rights and diversions all the way from the Colorado Big, the Lake Granby area, all the way down to the Utah border. Any one of those water rights have the right to divert any water that another water user doesn't use. So it would most certainly be diverted for most of the year. During the spring runoff, you might get a little bit down there. Then once it hits Lake Powell, there's really an upper and lower basin. The upper basin is Lake Powell and up. The lower basin is below Lake Powell and on down. Any water that is in Lake Powell essentially becomes part of the overall Lake Powell and Lake Mead water supply that is managed by the federal government, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And there are a number of operating protocols that essentially would essentially in the past has let that water go on past Lake Powell down to Lake Mead. And I'm going to editorialize here a little bit. The lower basin uses more water out of Lake Mead than they should. Than they're allocated, than is prudent, and as a result, that pulls down both Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And so, yes, water, you could try to get water on down there, but it would not have changed what we have, the situation we have right now with the water levels in either Powell or Mead. So, yeah, that's incredibly complex of why and how all that operates.
So just to sum up, what you said is, no matter how much we want to, there's no way for us to earmark any of our water for Lake Mead. Somebody else is going to get it. It might as well be us.
That is true. We can't.
Thank you.
Yes.
Doesn't look like there are any other comments. Thank you very much. This was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops, looks like we have Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the motion to accept the City of Longmont's 2022-2023 Water Supply and Drought Management Plan.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor? Well, let's vote first before I ask that. Whoops, I'm going to turn it on. So that carried unanimously. Thank you, Ken. So let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, now we come to, first of all, does anybody need a break? Are you ready to take a break, or can we move on, continue? Wrap it up?
No.
Thank you. We are. Now we're at general business, which is our public lands, facility, and shelter reservations, and we do have a presentation on this.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Peck, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to just start it up and frame it a little bit, as Harold might if he were here, and then turn it over to the team to talk a little bit about the process, what some of the goals of this was, and what we're asking tonight. So first of all, I just want to make sure that people understand what the goals of what we're doing are, and so I've laid them out here on this presentation. We're really trying to create safe and welcoming parks for all. And so we've created a neighborhood impact team, which I think you heard from a couple months ago regarding particularly Lanyon Park, but they've done some work and experimentation on what types of things worked in order to keep our parks safe and welcoming. The desired outcome of the changes that we're going to propose tonight is to enhance the health and safety and welfare of all the park users. These changes will provide clarity not only for our public safety partners, but also for the community, really help with enforcement and sustain the efforts that the neighborhood impact team have tried on Lanyon and now car parks. So we're talking about 3 changes tonight, and you can choose some of them, none of them, give us other direction. It's up to you how you'd like to move forward tonight, or you can pass the ordinance as it sits. The changes include the camping definition, shelters, and park hours, as you've heard from public invited to be heard. This is not an issue of one group of bad actors or people who are, for example, experiencing homelessness. This is a situation where we have seen a variety of things happening in the parks. And so after doing a little of experimentation, we're finding that these 3 changes we believe would help park-wide. So with that, I'd like to go through a little bit of the process. I'd like to turn it over to Carmen Palacios Ramirez to start with that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're going to share this presentation, but we will make it quick so you can see everybody that's been working on this. So as you recall, we came in February and we talked a little bit about the neighborhood impact team and a process. At that time, really what we wanted to do was begin our focus on what we had already started, our focus on 2 neighborhood parks, Lanyon and Carr. And this was coming from the community. So this was coming from the neighbors where Lanyon Park had become the broken window of that neighborhood. They had abandoned it, and to regain the trust has taken not only a lot of work, but I don't think we have that trust as of yet. This is what we heard from the neighbors, and this is what we saw as staff also. Park staff, park rangers, also our public safety staff and other folks that work in the area, that this, we wanted to really work on making public spaces, that the public spaces, were not welcoming and safe for residents and visitors. Little league teams or softball teams had refused to play at the field there because they did not feel safe. So that's still a question at this point. The alcohol and drug use and littering in the park area, especially folks leaving belongings behind that they no longer had a use for. The monopolization of the park shelter, excuse me on that one, but they were occupying the shelters for all day long. Literally, folks were encircling the shelters with shopping carts or tarps, and they were there all day long. It was not a matter of a couple hours. It was not a matter of 3 hours. So what we saw was a decreased resident activity and recreational use. People were refusing to hold activities there. They were refusing to rent the shelters because of the reputation of the park. And as I said, we've got other team members. So I'm going to have David Kennedy, Officer David Kennedy, talk a little bit about service calls and other data.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. David Kennedy, Longmont Public Safety. I don't see the slide up there yet. I'm just waiting for that to. Oh. I'm sorry. There we go. Council members, what you're looking at here is just a breakdown of the total calls for service beginning in March of 2021 and extending through April of 2022. So these are total calls for service month by month. So just to break down that a little more for you, what that means is that in total there were 571 calls for service, and that includes every police activity. Of that 571, 341 calls for service were extra patrols. In other words, these are proactive efforts by police to get out of their cars and spend time in the park. And this is at all different times of the day. So this is not just after park curfew hours, this is at any time of the day. In 2021, there were a total of 48 park curfew violations. By 2022, that number dropped to 4. In 2021, there were 20 trespassing violations. Once again, in 2022, that number broke down to 4. There were just a few other data points to mention of note where there were 11 total warrant arrests at the park during that 1 year period. And all the other call data is pretty small as far as there's 35 different other call types that are included in that 571, none of which really ranged over just 1, 2, or 3 calls for service regarding each data point. Does anybody have any questions regarding the data you're looking at? Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Sarah Arney.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. Sarah Arney, Master Police Officer, Neighborhood Resource Officer is my title. We've been working on this project for several months, and I wanted to go through the neighborhood impact team and what we found. A while back we gave you a presentation on what the neighborhood impact team consists of and the efforts that we have gone toward in the projects that we have been assigned with. So what we've identified in Lanyon is, and what we've wanted to do, is decrease the number of unhoused folks living on the streets and provide opportunities to access services and housing. And then decreasing opportunity for anyone to behave badly in our parks, and that's where our extra patrols really were able to step up and make that difference. Working in collaborations with agency partners to connect and engage unhoused people into the programs. We worked I'd say very closely. We had weekly meetings with Elder and Lead and Hope when they were needed, and especially Hope. sustaining a balance of intervention service and compliance that supports welcoming and safe public spaces. So, I know you've heard this, talking about bringing activities to the park. We want to bring these activities to the park, but we've heard so many times that people aren't feeling safe in the park, so they're not going to come. So we could bring all these activities, but ultimately at the end, we're not going to have any participation if we don't have that safe feeling. Sustaining a communication plan that informs neighbors, businesses, community partners, and homeless of intervention resources and compliance efforts. We've done that in many ways, I would say. We have separate emails and phone lines for each of these neighborhoods to reach out to us, and we can check these, and we do. We're getting a lot of feedback even to this day. Our resource fair, there's several folks that came out that were very appreciative of that, and I know the few of you that were there met a few of the people that talk to us all the time. One thing I did want to say too about the stats is that we get a weekly park data or calls for service, and it ebbs and flows just like anything in our city, but I would say Lanyon Park has been our #1 calls for service for some time now. And you have to also consider that that number's high because we're doing these extra patrols, right? So that's why that number's so high. So that's not a bad thing. I just wanted to point that out to you. I'll turn it over to David. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Carmen Ramirez, Mayor and Council. So real quickly, we just wanted to mention that Lanyon and Carr Park curfew hours were changed temporarily a few months ago. And neighbors at both parks have expressed appreciation and a better sense of safety because of the change in the curfew hours specifically. We haven't even talked about the other two proposed changes. And then also in the proposed amendment changes, it'll help us to address and sustain the efforts that we're doing not only at Lanyon and Carr, but we also know that there's a tendency for some of these issues, vandalism, graffiti, and other of the behaviors that happen, they've moved. You've heard it over the years. You've heard it at different parks. We focus on one park, what's going to happen? It moves to another park. So that's another reason that you might want to consider. And the efforts to sustain it is, unfortunately, this is where we're at, to try and provide better clarity, consistency, so that we can enforce. But as you've heard, we also work on compassionate compliance. You heard from a gentleman from Change the Future, Anthony Carrillo. I went out there on a Sunday to meet him and the group that feed folks and provide him with flyers regarding resources. The response at that time was, I didn't know all these things were available. So I'm doing that constantly, whether it's the neighbors or a community member that would like to help. I'm trying to say, hey, this is where we have resources. Join those folks and let's expand their capacity. So I just wanted to share that also. David's going to go through the proposed amendments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. You all have received the three ordinances you've heard about a little bit this evening, but I just want to take a little time to talk about how we went through the thought process to come up in crafting the language that really ended up with these specific ordinances. As Carmen mentioned, this started out as a change to Lanyon and Carr Park, which can come through rules and regulations. The director can make those changes in hours just by posting that. So those are done just through an administrative process, through the request coming to the director, and then me making the approval to make those temporary changes. As we look at the input from council and the neighborhood impact team to make this a broader rules and regs change across all of our parks, we want to make sure we came to council with that sort of background that we've seen it work at Lanyon, we've seen it work at Carr, and give the opportunity for us to kind of bring a ordinance through that addresses all the parks. As we went through the camping definition, we already have a definition that says you cannot, ordinance that says you cannot camp in our parks unless it's an area that is already designated for camping. Right now, we have no designated camping areas. That was Union at one point. So there really is no place that allows camping. This new definition really allows us to define what camping is. So as you read through this, there's several elements that really define what camping it is. It really is those more than 2 hours. It's having something that provides shelter or cover for more than 2 hours, and it's those activities of daily living that go along with it. So there are elements that go along with that. We also looked at how we would manage some of the sporting activities out at Sandstone Ranch. We talk about having tents, because we're going to treat everyone the same. If you're under a tent and it's more than 2 hours, we're going to have the ability to have an officer stop by and talk to you about why you're there and what you're doing. But if you're at Sandstone, our recreation division leases those areas out for those sporting activities, so they would fall under the definition of the lease or the terms of the lease. We also know that we have a couple of parks in our system that people are going to be out with probably less clothing than other ones. Dickens Park and McIntosh, where they're out on the water and probably enjoying the sunshine and want to have people to have the ability to have some sort of shade structure. So this definition allows for us to post certain parks to allow for shade structures longer than that 2-hour period. And that can be posted, and again, we'll probably start with those 2 areas where we know people have the ability to have more sun exposure and want to give them the opportunity to protect themselves from that. So that's where we ended up with the camping definition. I could do these one at a time if you have questions about a specific one, or I'll just go through all 3 of them. All right, I'll keep going.
I do have one question.
Yes.
The 2-hour limit, does this also apply to people who reserve a shelter for a picnic, for a birthday party or whatever?
Mayor, council members, that is also excluded if you have the reservation for the shelter. It goes not to see that, and I think that is a little vague in here. It's the piece as you read of the LMC 132070, which is our shelter reservation.
Okay, thank you.
So we tried to look at all those. Again, I think that background is try to talk through these as a group on what we can do to make it usable for the people who are trying to do those proper activities, the things we want to see in the park, the activities we want to see in the park, the birthday parties we want to see in the park.
So Councilor Hidalgo-Faring also has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a follow-up question to that. So, you had said that people could reserve those spaces for a longer period of time. I guess for the public, general public, is there a fee? How is the process, going online? If you could kind of define for the public what that process looks like so they know where and how to extend those hours.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring, there is a process, and you can go online, you can check and reserve the shelters. That could be, some people don't have the computer skills, they don't have the computer, they don't have their phone right there, so we also have a phone number that people can call in. I'll get the phone call sometimes, they'll go to recreation sometimes. We really try to walk them through that process to make it as easy as possible. So people that have the ability to just log on and do it, it's a pretty easy process. If you need some help, there's always going to be a person that's willing to help you out. So the piece I don't have for you this evening is I don't know the price on the shelters right now, but we can make sure we get back to you. But the website will have that as you go to that.
Looks like you can continue.
All right. The next one would be the shelter reservations. And this is something, again, as we talked about these ordinances affecting just a certain group of people. One of the things that is we have been dealing with shelters and shelter reservations. When we get a group of 15 people that just show up, or 20 people that show up, that has an impact on the parks and operations staff because there's trash associated with that. The next group that comes in doesn't have a clean shelter. So the more we have knowledge of large groups coming into the system, the better chance we have to set that up, make sure trash is empty before they get there, and then have trash emptied afterwards. So there really is an operational piece that benefits parks operations by having the 15 or more people giving a reservation. The 2 hours, again, is I think there's that ability to that first come, first serve, which is always nice, but if someone takes that shelter for the whole day, it makes it hard for those people that want to come in and use it after their event or for a shorter amount of time. So I think those really, again, address a lot of broader issues that we've seen in our shelters and how we have more equitable use throughout the shelters and also give park operations a chance to really manage those shelters better. And then the last one, which I think you heard the most about this evening, is going to be the park hours. And as we looked at this, was a combination of conversations between recreation and programming, park use, neighbors that live close to the park, ability to move through parks, using facilities within the parks, and how we came to that ability to do that. And what we really did is said, we want people to use those facilities that were meant to be used the way they were. So if we have lighted facilities within a park, that use can still continue until 10 o'clock at night. It was 11 o'clock, so we do have that change. And if there's questions on sort of the patrol pieces that came into that. So probably officer could probably touch on that a little bit more, but that 1 hour seems to really make a difference as they're out patrolling the parks. So you can be in the park using those lighted facilities. If you're over your friend's or neighbor's house and you're walking back through, again, our parks, trails, and greenways are open for continual movement through the park. So you have access to the park. If it's out through the walk to walk your dog or moving through is fine, and it's using facilities. It's going to be acceptable activities as well. We went with 1 hour before sunrise, 1 hour after sunset for a couple reasons. We have been using dusk and dawn. That would have given us 3 different sets of hours. We would have had the community parks, which are 5 a.m. to 11. We would have had our nature areas, which are 1 hour before sunrise to 1 hour after sunset, and then our neighborhood parks would be dusk to dawn. As we look at those times, they're very close together, and it makes it easier for, I think, our community and our officers to recognize we just have 2 sets of rules and regs as far as hours. We have the community parks, and then we have the neighborhood parks and nature areas that are going to be the 1 hour before sunrise and 1 hour after sunset. And I end up with the question slide as well.
Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, and David and everybody. My questions may bounce around a little bit. I would at first like to address the good points that were made by the public this evening. Having been following this effort since, what, July 21st of last year? Is that the official kickoff date? What I have found is that this is a process. And I have things that I would have changed about the process. I would like to state an objective for future processes at some point this evening if I get the chance. But it is a process that was developed through a long period of effort, and I believe that we should respect the process and respect the numbers and the outcomes that this, what I would call a tiger team out of the private sector, came up with. And while we might want to relax this ordinance in the future, when we've got a better handle on how our indigent population and our permanent residents interact with one another, then we can do that. But I think for right now, we ought to respect the findings of the team as they've come up with them, because I'm sure that they have balanced these figures in terms of what is patrollable, what is enforceable, and what the neighborhoods most at risk, how they feel about it. And what David made the point, which I didn't know, is that if you're walking your dog or you're going home, you can still walk through the park after it's closed, which makes a big difference, because the only people I know who care about real late night stuff are the people walking their dogs. And I also know, having an intimate relationship with Lanyon Park and the late night users of Lanyon, that there is vandalism at Lanyon. There are people sleeping all night in that park. And so all this stuff still applies. It just doesn't happen to be as visible. Okay. Mayor, how much time do I have?
2 minutes, 43
Okay.
seconds.
I have some questions, and I can read them in a minute, but I can't do it and get the answers. So what I'd like to do is read my questions and then give you the list, and you can answer them. How many incidents of violence involving unhoused persons in Lanyon Park were reported since July 2021? How many such incidents were reported the prior year? Who's reporting the incidents? Neighborhood residents, passersby, patrol officers, etc. How many incidents of nonviolent infractions using alcohol, needles, or verbal confrontations or inappropriate behavior? Who reported the incidents? How many incidents of curfew violations, such as camping overnight, sleeping in restrooms or shelters? How often were apparently abandoned belongings, including clothing, bedrolls, and trash, picked up by city staff? And how often were shopping carts confiscated by patrolling officers? And if somebody wants to have the list, I've got a copy of it. And I'll use those questions in my next time at bat.
Councilor Martin, staff can answer those questions. They're not on a timer.
Well, I've never been sure whether the timer stops, when the timer stops and starts again, so I thought I'd make sure.
We think we can get close on many of these, but let's bring up a little sheet for you. We have a lot of this data, but part of the issue is that it's really tiny. It's teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So let me bring it up on the screen. It's pretty tiny, but let me go ahead and bring it up while we're talking here.
And I'm only asking for an approximation, because I know my questions aren't going to be the same as your spreadsheets.
Yeah, because we don't have, I don't believe we have a coding for shopping carts and stuff like this in this particular sheet, right? So let me pull it up and let's take a look and see what we've got here. If it would be okay, maybe just a 2-minute break while I bring it up?
Okay, that
That'd be
would be
okay?
perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I like that.
So we're going to take a 2-minute break?
Unless there's other data that people are interested in that we could look up during this break as well.
Is anyone else interested in having a question answered at this? Councilor Yarbrough?
Regarding the data, not the policies, regarding the data.
No? Okay.
Okay.
We're good.
All right, we'll work on it while you take a break.
Okay, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. So what we do have in front of you here, and we're going to get some copies made, are the types of violations that have happened, particularly in Lanyon Park over the last 2 years. I'm going to show you in two ways. This is the type, the call type, so that you have an idea of what the call type is. And as I said, we're going to get some copies for you because it's really tiny. And then we also have kind of a time frame, being able to look and see what it looks like over time. So things like violent crimes, you're talking about disturbances and assaults and things like that. What we don't have available tonight that we could get for you if the council directs is who reported it and who it includes. So we have the numbers on how many, and we have them broken out between 2021 and 2022. What we don't have at our fingertips is who reported it and was there somebody who was homeless that was involved. So if the council directs us to do that, we can certainly provide that information and bring it back. So I'll go ahead and pass those out. So I'm going to turn it back over to Officer Arnita. Yeah. Yes.
So just to Mayor Peck and council, to reiterate what Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar was talking about, as far as number 5, reported these incidents. So people have the ability to call in and remain anonymous. That's going to be an option. Our residents can leave their name, or it's an officer that's going by and seeing activity, and that's how generally we get our reports.
And we can get that data, but it's going to take a bit deeper dive into each call for service. We're probably going to have to have our crime analyst actually look at each call and make that determination who the caller was, whether it was a citizen or, a passerby, that kind of stuff. So, which we can do if that's what council would like.
Yes.
And just so you know as well, I've been tracking a lot of this data on my own on our Teams app, so other city staff has access to view it. And we also have parks uploading their activity as far as staff seeing issues. They're posting pictures of damage and vandalism. So anyone can view that has access to Teams. And so I can pull that data as well from what I'm collecting and our CAD system. So we're really trying to stay on top of it as far as the data piece goes.
Officer Arnie, would you rather we hold our questions to the end of everything, or do you want each? Does it matter to you?
Does not matter.
Anytime, yeah.
Okay. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I don't want to make this much work. I am really interested in, of course, somebody else could be interested in more, but I'm only interested in things that are dangerous, okay? So a sex assault, an assault, shots heard, because I'm going someplace in particular with this, and an auto theft isn't going to be applicable. An injured animal isn't going to be applicable, because what we're looking at is what creates a dangerous situation. So you probably know the codes better than I do, but that's the only part I'm really interested in. And thanks, by the way, this was quick work getting all this.
Sure. One thing, too, I wanted to point out, so, if you look at this handout we provided, it basically starts out with the number 1 calls for service, and that would be the extra patrols. But if you go down, the curfew is the second most highest call for service, then trespassing, and then if you see the disturbances, so that basically can be the root cause of a lot of other issues, right? Like we get a disturbance call and then we find narcotics or someone that has a dangerous weapon, et cetera. So that just ranks how many, like where we were and as far as the types of calls we were getting.
So yeah, what it does is just kind of give you that general picture, like Sarah says. Sometimes things start off as one thing and really turn out to be something completely different. So once again, kind of that deeper dive. Let's use the sex assault that's in 2021, for example. That's a serious crime, a very concerning crime to the community. So we need to look at the details of that case and really find out, is that something that's related to this discussion that we're having today?
And as far as you had asked, how often are we collecting abandoned belongings, including clothing, bedrolls, et cetera? Park staff have been giving me the information, so like I just mentioned, I'm keeping track of that. But I can tell you, and I'm sure David could speak to that, it's daily. And it is taking a lot of their time and efforts to keep the parks clean. And the shopping carts, I'm tracking those as well. How they're being confiscated by officers it's really on an ebb and flow and time basis on calls for service. We have gone into patrol briefings. They're all educated on the process and how we're doing that. And to be quite honest, we don't have all the time to do that. It's definitely been an effort that we're trying to keep up on, and other city staff are helping us do that.
Yeah, I would just add that Officer Arnie has been sending out emails to all city staff recently saying, found a shopping cart, let us know and help us get it back to its rightful owner. Mayor, I did a little bit of quick math on those that were the violent crimes that we were just talking about. In 2021, that would equal 47. And of course, you have to understand that 2022 hasn't happened, we're not through 2022 yet, but 47 in 2021 and 8 in 2022. Those are the things you and I identified. Councilmember Martin, does that help you get, what else would you like to know that we haven't been able to provide you tonight?
You know what, I'm going to make a proposal on the second round, and you can maybe infer what else I might be interested in because of that, or what else you might be interested in because of that.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Yarbrough, you had your light on before with this presentation. Do you still want to speak? Okay.
Thank you for all you do. I just want to bring up, we had a lot of, public to be heard about this. And I know you all has started this last year before I was on council. And for some reason, it just seemed to me that there was a lack of communication as to why the community didn't know that we were having these discussions about the parks. I know in February, I was on council and we were talking about it. So is there a gap that you feel like, I know people in the Lanyon Park area and Carr Park area have complained, and I know our neighborhood team, you all have done a wonderful job, with that information. But is there something we're missing as to why the community feel like they're not being heard, or feel like this is like a last-minute decision on city council part or the city part? Because we've been talking about this for a long time. So I guess I'm just wondering, where are we missing, the miscommunication to the public? And why do they feel like their voices are not being heard, or this is like a last-minute situation? I don't know, so I'm a little confused about that. And maybe you don't even have an answer, I don't know, but I'm a little confused because I know in February we was talking about it before we even got to this point. And also, if one of you or both of you or all of you can just mention as to why it's important that we are consistent across the board with all the parks. If you can mention that, I would appreciate that as well.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Yarborough, let me take a shot at the first one, and then maybe I can get some help on the second one. So I think that traditionally we do a lot of community involvement around things that we're either going to be doing to improve parks or we're going to be improving community. In this particular case, I think it was pretty serious and pretty severe and very quick. Maybe not quick in what's happening, but certainly our response, we were trying to be very quick in that response. So it's a very fine line between what is the right role of the community in that involvement and what is the operational decision that the city needs to make to be able to take care of an issue that's coming up in a neighborhood. And so this one probably fell more on the operational decision-making side than it did the community involvement side, but I can see why people would feel that way. Because generally, we do have very robust community involvement decision-making. And so in this case, I think really reacting to a situation that we had to in order to provide safety for a neighborhood. So I'm sure it feels that way to the community, that they weren't really included in the decision-making. And I would say, to some extent, that's very true, because we're really reacting to something that's happening in the community. And I would say it's not just Lanyon and Carr. I do think there are other parks where we have received similar types of calls. And so it's a tough line, because we want to involve the community when their voice is going to make a difference. And so in this case, if we're really going to be looking as an operational decision, it's a tough line. So there's my answer to number one. Your second question was about why it's important for it to be consistent. So I'm wondering if maybe Carmen or Sarah could answer that. Oops, turn your microphone on. There you go.
Okay. Mayor Peck and Councilperson Yarbrough. So one of the things that is really important in order for us to be able to keep this operational is sustaining it and consistency. As you heard earlier, if we have rules for the greenways and we have rules for this park but different for this park, then there's that issue of all of public safety, park rangers, and other staffs understanding those different rules, as well as the community. So this helps across the board, just like currently curfew for youth. It's across the city. Whether they're in a park or they're on the street, there's a particular curfew. So that consistency and that ability to sustain the efforts. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I have been at meetings on athletic field where we had over 100 neighbors when the issue was happening at Athletic Field, the Kitely neighborhood. We have been at meetings with Roosevelt Park when there was probably at least close to 100 people, as the officers are nodding their head and they remember, when the neighbors were really feeling the same thing that the Lanyon Park neighbors felt. I believe that in Lanyon Park, we have a lot more multi-housing rentals. Sarah actually has 10 properties that are part of crime-free multi-housing, and we've done that outreach. So it hasn't been to just a couple of blocks around that area. So as Sandy said, because it's operational and because we looked at those most impacted by the activity, we did that outreach. For Carr Park, we sent out over 300 letters informing them of the curfew change. I got 2 calls, and both said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then explained that they had had some thefts, and they believed that it was people that were hanging out in the parks late at night. So there is some activity there that they said addressed it. So I hope that helps answer that question. Councilor Yarbrough? Thank you.
Can I add a little bit to that? Thank you, Mayor Peck and Councilwoman Yarbrough. I really think you talk about consistency in our parks and around our community, and what we, from the start of this, public safety we already knew what we were going to have to chase, and that was going to focusing on Lanyon Park so much. We knew they were going to go to the next park or to North Main. So we really focused our efforts not just on Lanyon, but the North Corridor and Carr Park. So we have information on all of that, and we have since the beginning because we knew we were going to have those issues. And consistency for all parks for the same rules makes it much easier for us to do any type of enforcement at all. And, you know, it might seem really, I guess, elementary, but sometimes when we're going to, say, a felony menacing, and all of a sudden, you know, we need to remember these, like, the small things, we don't always get to remember. And if it's confusing, it's like just the next thing that we have to think about, right? Mayor Peck, you had mentioned a little bit earlier about how this is, and we spoke, this is not a black and white issue as far as you're in the park sitting on a bench and you're there for 5 minutes, and if a police officer drives by, we're going to stop and maybe talk to you, and the person just says, oh, we're just here, we're getting ready to leave. I don't believe we're going to get these issues. We're also going to be able to filter the problem with this and these ordinance changes. It's not going to be that we cannot effectively do our jobs without, and I'm kind of getting lost here, sorry. What I'm trying to say is that it's not so black and white, and it leaves the gray area for us to decipher what we need to do. Do you have anything to add to that?
And Officer Arno, you're talking about specifically enforcement of this.
Correct.
So for example,
Correct.
if the council did decide that they'd like to pass this ordinance as it's laid out today, the enforcement isn't black and white. The minute you see somebody in a
Correct.
park at 1 minute past 1 hour past dusk, it's not.
Correct.
You know, it really is dependent on the situation and what they're finding. And yeah, what kinds of patterns they're seeing. So I think that's important to note too. As David mentioned before, if you're walking your dog through the park, that's not part of it, for example. Yeah. Does that answer your question about enforcement, Mayor Peck?
It does. I understand that, like you said, it's not black and white, and until we are actually into the process, it's going to be very difficult to understand who's going to want to use that, want to stay in there after 10 o'clock. It goes, enforcing is difficult. It's not something you can just have draw a line, and that's it. So,
And that's the case all the time
Right.
for our public safety officers. That's the case all the time. You know, a couple of other things that I just want to mention is the partnerships around people who are unhoused. So I think that that's kind of been the focus of the conversation, but again, I would note that that's not every situation we're finding in the parks is not due to somebody who is unhoused. We have all kinds of people that are in the parks that are doing all kinds of things that may not be legal. But when we are finding people who are unhoused, the first step is to try to find assistance, right? Because otherwise, we're just moving people along, just as the public spoke about and public invited to be heard. So those partnerships are critical in trying to get people into a situation where they are able to be housed. And that's the first step before we continue to move on down that continuum.
do we have any other discussion from other counselors? So does somebody want to make a motion here? We have 3 options on this presentation.
Or however
Or
the
on
council would like to proceed. We're suggesting 3 ordinance changes in the ordinances below. You can either pass the ordinance as if this was a first reading, could ask for more information, you could pass pieces of it, or give us different direction.
Let's see, Counselor Martin. Whoops, I'm sorry. Try again.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I would like to give additional direction, but just to get it out of the way, let's discuss the 3 proposed ordinances, and I would like to propose or move that we let them be taken forward as they are proposed.
Okay, so it has been moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor Waters, that we accept the amendments as proposed. We open for discussion? Not on this motion. Okay, so the motion's been made. Let's vote on that motion. So that carries unanimously. So I guess we've accepted it as proposed.
I do need to check in with Eugene. Does that mean that the ordinance has passed first reading and up for second at this point? That's kind of what I'm hearing. That's the intention, yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So we're at final call, public invited to be heard? No, we're not?
One more item.
Where are we? Oh, B.
Wait a minute,
Yeah, I think-
said I wanted to propose additional directions, which is still part of the item that we're on. I just wanted to get that vote out of the way.
Okay, so Counselor Martin.
What I have not heard in all of this effort, and I do like where it ended up, is kind of an overarching principle. And I think that we have got two. One is we need to reduce the friction between the housed and the unhoused population, and maybe that's so high level that everybody just assumed that that's what it was, you know. But I'd like to articulate that. And then the other thing is that I think we have to provide a basic level of human dignity. You know, we say that we are a housing first community when it comes to dealing with unhoused persons, but in fact we don't have the wherewithal to be really housing first. And to a great extent, people are congregating around the park restrooms and shelters because it's the only unsupervised, unpoliced shelters that we have. And I have just this last week seen what can be done with one of those shelters at Affolter Park. It's what I would call hardened and what y'all would call septed or crime prevention through environmental design. It's hard to vandalize. When somebody's using it, other people are locked out, so you can't get ambushed while you're using the restroom. If somebody stays in there too long or shoots up and dies or whatever, an alarm goes off. And those things make places like that safer. I think everybody ought to have a place to use the bathroom and get water all year around. And I think that everybody, even if they don't fit into any of our housing programs, should be able to have clean water, a shower, and be able to wash their clothes. And mil-spec solutions for all of those facilities exist. And I think that we should budget for them, and I think we should put them someplace that is not in the park. And I think that that facility should include lockers and maybe post office boxes, and that would draw the homeless population away from the park and have them using a facility that was built specifically to give them the basics of human decency as we define it in the 21st century. And so that's the additional direction that I would propose, is that in this coming budget season, that the staff investigate creating an indigent services facility.
Perfect timing.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure I caught it. So 2023 budget, investigate an indigent service
Facility. And the reason I was asking all the questions about crimes was because the objection that I've heard is that such a facility would not be policeable. And I think it would.
Councillor Waters.
Number 8 needs his mic on.
There you
Thank
go.
you, Mayor Peck. So we have our first budget presentation next week, right? And I know that's going to be the kind of the overview. I see Jim in the back. We're not going to be looking at specific programs, but we will over the course of the summer. So this direction gets taken up in the context of, I would assume, one of those, maybe if not public safety, community services, or one of those budget presentations, we'll have a chance to talk about this specifically.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Waters, yes, next week is a couple of things. One of those is included the budget, the beginning budget conversations where you all are able to share some of your budget priorities for the next year.
Yeah, very good. And
timing is good.
The related piece to that is, if I think, as I'm listening to Councilmember Martin, thinking about what we received and what work we did, you all did the heavy lifting with ARPA funds. There was $1.5 million line, as I recall, and that could go up or down based on what happens with ARPA funding for other projects, specifically dedicated to something akin to what I just heard. Is that not
That is true.
So we would get a chance not only to talk about what the budget, how the budget reflects priorities for parks, but in addition to that, more detail or specifics on what that $1.5 million would be used for, and how close it comes to what we just heard as concerns from Councilmember Martin.
Yes, at this time, that ARPA funding is just earmarked for unhoused
Yeah.
assistance, and I don't believe that there is a plan for it yet, but.
All right, thanks.
Good comments. So now we are at the Parks and Rec Advisory Board motion regarding future recreation facilities. And we have Jeff Friesner.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Jeff Friesner, Recreation and Golf Manager. I will be very brief. I want to thank you for your consideration this evening of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board's motion from February 16th, asking you all to consider a public process, financial analysis, and conceptual design of future recreation facilities. With that, I will answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions from councilors? Councilor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Not questions really for
Discussions.
Jeff. Is this, I'm just kind of curious what you would like. Would you like a motion that we accept this? I know all we did initially was agree to put it on the agenda.
And I think you're correct, we need to put it on the agenda, but we might put it on a agenda-specific, a date-specific, if we're going to be talking about budgets. So I guess that's up to you, if you want to make a motion to do that, to a future agenda. What, is there?
I just, what's the most productive? So I'm going to move we formally accept, we agreed to put this on the agenda. I'm going to move we formally accept the recommendation, and then to be scheduled would be the follow-up discussion about dimension, scope, timing, the schedule for a feasibility study, what that might look like. I last night at the PRAB meeting, there was a chance to get a little bit of an advanced look at what the capital improvement budget includes. There'll be a line, there's a project code, I don't remember what year, but way more than we're going to spend in 2023, but it'll be in the queue for discussion.
Tonight or at the agenda where it's actually?
No, I'm talking about when it comes up.
Absolutely, yes.
So the motion then is that we formally accept the recommendation or the statement from the PRAB and continue the discussion when we get into capital improvement budget and moving forward what that might look like.
I'll second that. So it's been moved by Councilor Waters and seconded by myself to accept the PRAB's discussion about moving this recreations facility discussion to a future agenda. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thank you.
This is exciting. So, Councilor Waters, did you have your hand up? Or? No. Okay. Oh. Okay.
Be sure not to move.
Don't move quickly. That's right. So now we're finally at the final public invited to be heard. I only see 2 members of the public here. Would you like to say something? No? Okay, thank you. Mayor and council comments. Do we have any discussion or comments from councilors? Seeing none?
Oh, actually, I do.
Councilor Hidalgo Ferry.
So I'm looking forward to the city employee breakfast this Thursday. I was looking at my calendar. I was like, I know that there's other stuff coming up, and then the memorial for fallen officers Thursday as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and thank you for the invites. And these are open. Well, the city employee breakfast is not open to the public, but the other is, and it is at
4:30 on Thursday, right here in the Civic Center Mall.
perfect. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
It'd be great if you can join us.
Yes.
Councilor, I'm sorry, Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just am taking this opportunity to ask for clarification because I offered some additional direction for staff, and I thought I had framed it as a motion, but nothing happened.
I didn't hear a motion.
I said I would propose. Does that not count as a motion?
Not really.
Oh, you look so happy.
No, I'm not happy.
Okay, well, I'll put it on a future agenda then.
Okay, good idea. So, Assistant City Manager remarks.
No other comments, Mayor?
Eugene, City Attorney?
No comments, Mayor?
Okay. So we need a motion to adjourn. I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Vote. Please vote yes. So that carries unanimously. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Oh.